Oh, you guys. You're crazy. You are crazy people. Thank you. I have never met such excitable people. Thank you. Thank you for your kind welcome. And welcome to Salt or Elements, a series in which we're looking at the importance of developing mentally and emotionally because that affects us spiritually. Think of it like a rap battle between you and your problems, only you're going to win because your rhymes are better. Tonight we're going to be looking at the importance that faith plays in our mental and emotional health. So I hope you enjoy this. But first, it's time for a story. When my friend Dean was younger, he decided it would be a good idea to go home at lunchtime from school and learn how to drive his parents' car. Dean was 12 at the time, and he had no idea how to drive a car. He went home, he managed to get away from school and scurry back to his house. He went inside his house and got the keys off the fridge. He went out to the garage, got inside the car and turned it on. Dean even managed to put the car in reverse, which is pretty exciting because it was a Vita Beetle, the old ones. It's really hard to get into reverse, trust me. And he did everything technically right. He put his foot on the gas, he had it on the clutch, he put it in gear, he took it off the clutch, and he still had his foot on the gas. So technically he did everything right. But those of you that have already learned how to drive know that driving, it's not all about sort of doing things technically right, is it? It's more about finesse. And that's one thing he did not have in his favour. And so yes, Dean reversed out of his garage, but he really reversed out of his garage. I mean, he came flying out the back of his garage and smack into their tree. Remember how I told you it was an old Vita Beetle? Anyone remember where the engine is on an old Vita Beetle? Yeah, some people do. So it's in the boot, right? So Dean hasn't just damaged the car, he has entirely written the car off. It will never, ever go again. And Dean did what most of us would do, at that age anyway. He got out of the car, he looked around to see that no one else was watching, and then he thought to himself, it wasn't me, because no one can see it. He took things a step further, Dean, not one to do things in halves. He broke into his own house. Yes, he had the key, but he wanted to make it look like a break-in. He pushed a few things over. He ransacked the place. He took some of his mother's jewellery. He went back out to the garage and got some spray cans and tried to tag as best he could. Then he went back to school. After school, he didn't go straight home. He wanted his parents to discover the mess first. And so he went to his mate's house, and after that he came home. And when he came home, he found his mum and dad standing at the edge of the driveway. His mum was in tears. They looked up and saw Dean and they said, Dean, you are never going to guess what happened. He said, what? They said, a gang has been in our house and they have taken jewellery and they damaged the car and they tagged things. And Dean's standing there on the edge of the driveway going, no. Now, the scary part about the story is Dean actually got away with it for 2 weeks. He started freaking out, when the police came and started doing fingerprints on the car, and so he knew he was in trouble. Now, I'm pretty sure that all of us know what that feeling is like. You know, that 2-week feeling. That 2 week, it's got to be the worst feeling in all of the world. The feeling that you know you're in trouble, but you're not in trouble yet. It's the impending doom. And In psychology and in theology, they say that this is one reason why people reject the notion of faith altogether. It's that they believe that if God is true, then I'm in trouble with this God. Now, that is not the only cause for people not wanting to find a faith. Some people, it's true, they don't want to find God because that would be inconvenient, but there are plenty of other reasons. What do you think are the main reasons that people reject a faith in God? See how many you can come up with.
So I reckon that mainly it's just because people misunderstand God, and I think they don't really want to involve themselves into something that could be like a freaky whole new world or something like that.
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons why people reject God is probably a process called transference. That's where they may have experienced rejection or abandonment as a child, particularly with their parents or even with some of their friends at school or even some of their enemies. And I believe that's transferred onto God, and they kind of believe, well, if the closest people in my life have rejected me, therefore I've got a right to reject God. It's not only that, but I think it's definitely a major reason. Another one would be misconceptions about who God is and what they think He's about. But I think the fundamental one is a lack of trust.
I don't know if you saw it in the news a couple of years ago, but there was this fantastic news item. Basically, in Slovakia, which is overseas somewhere, there were a couple of young boys, 11 years old and 12 years old, and they decided to smoke their first ever cigarette. And so they didn't want to be seen, so they snuck down. This is in some medieval city, a little town rather, in Slovakia. They decided to sneak down the back of the castle that was in their town, and they lit up their first cigarette. Well, somehow one thing led to another, and the dry grass that they were standing in caught alight, followed by the castle. Oh. Now, I don't imagine that these boys ran home to tell their parents. It seems to be a universal truth that when we're in trouble, we want to hide that from our parents. And so yet again, I think this could be one reason why people want to run from God. And what's needed, folks, is an epiphany. We need to understand that running from God is running in the wrong direction. We need to run to God instead. A friend of mine, Edwin, had an amazing experience at church one week. He said that after the service, he saw a guy there he'd never seen before, a young guy. So he wandered up to him and introduced himself. He got a conversation going, and after a few seconds, he worked out that this guy was blind. And so that was fine. During the end of the conversation, he asked this young blind guy where he lived, and he said, I live in this huge community of blind people. There's 24 of us, and we live in a massive sort of old mansion somewhere in town. And so Edwin said to him, well, would you mind if I visited you to check out your house and check out, your friends that you live with? And he said, absolutely, that's fantastic. Now, being true to his word, Edwin turned up to this house later in the week after work when it was dark. He walked into reception and he asked for the name of the young guy. The receptionist said, well, at this time of night, you'll probably be upstairs with everyone else in the library. So Edwin went up this grand sweeping staircase to the great library, opened the door, but no one was in there. It was empty, or at least he thought it was empty because it was pitch black. He thought, oh, well, it must be somewhere else. So he turned to go away and he heard some noises. What's going on, he thought. He turned back around, he listened really quietly, and yeah, there were noises going on. He thought, they must be playing some game in the library. What are they doing? So he fumbled around inside and he managed to find a light switch. And when the lights came on, he found that the library was actually full of people. They were playing games, they were playing cards, they were on computers, they were using Braille, they were getting on with life. And it struck Edwin between the eyes because he thought, man, here I was coming to visit the disabled guy I met, and yet in this room, in this house, I'm the one who's disabled. I'm the one who needs the light. They don't even need it at all. That's the sort of epiphany we need. We need a total reversal when it comes to God. Modern psychology teaches us that as individuals, we've got to internalize our self-worth, which means that we need to stop looking for our sense of worth from other people. We've got to take it out of their hands, and we need to give that self-worth to ourselves. That's what modern psychology says is internalizing our self-worth. But here's my question. What are you going to base your self-worth on? I mean, what value will you just ascribe yourself? What worth have you got? I think this is one of the most important roles of faith, for me anyway. The idea that we are named by another, we are given value by another, we are given significance and worth by another, and that other is God. To talk more about the impact of our faith as it relates to our mental health, Belinda is going to speak now.
A lot of the time people come to see me for counselling because they're struggling with things like depression or anxiety, could be addictions, could be relationship problems. But the real problem turns out to be what they're basing their life on, actually. where they're getting their sense of self-worth from. The problem arises because often people put their self-worth into things that are changeable, things like their popularity or their achievements, or how beautiful or handsome they are, or how clever they are. None of these things are stable, and so what we need to find a source of self-esteem that's unshakable, unchangeable, solid. And that's where God comes in, because He's not going to fire you from your job. He's not going to break up with you or move cities or stop being friends with you. God is actually the only truly reliable source of self-esteem that we have. So how we're meant to develop healthy self-worth is that when you're a kid, your parents start giving you these positive messages about yourself. They say things to you like, you're an awesome kid, I believe in you, I know you can do this, you can succeed in life. And over time, they reinforce it until you start to really believe it for yourself. And so by the time you're an adult and you're ready to leave home, you don't need your parents to keep saying that stuff to you anymore, because you believe it for yourself. You've internalized it. Unfortunately, there are lots of people who don't get that from their families. And so sometimes we need to give that to ourselves as adults. We need to encourage ourselves. We need to celebrate our accomplishments. When we mess up, we need to say, hey, you can do this. Get back up and try again. The thing is, the way your self-worth is meant to work is that first and foremost, you get your messages from God about who you are. You get your self-worth from Him. So God loves you because you're His kid. God never changes His mind about you. You can't do anything to earn God's love. You just already have it. And then secondly, you internalize that. So I know I'm okay. And then thirdly, you can also get some of your self-worth from the important people in your life, from them praising you and encouraging you and supporting you when you fail. And you can also get some of your self-worth from your achievements and your accomplishments. The key is to keep these things in the right order. You can't afford to put other people's opinions of you higher than God's opinion of you, because that's just unstable. That's not going to work. People often ask me, as a Christian counsellor, can you work with people who don't believe in God? And the answer is absolutely, yes I can, except for when it comes to this area. The problem is when you take God out of the equation, all you're left with is your own and other people's opinion of you. But because we mess up all the time, because we're human, because we make mistakes, it's very hard to keep believing that you're okay when you know that about yourself. So what we actually need is an external reference point. We need God's perspective on us. And so when I'm working with someone who doesn't believe in God, there comes a point that I usually say to them, look, I'm really sorry, but I can't take you any further in this area unless you're willing to consider putting your trust in a God who knows everything about you, your strengths and your weaknesses, and still loves you anyway. And the cool thing is, most people are really okay with that.
So what we're saying here is that it is vitally important to get our self-worth primarily from God's view of us. But I think what most people find very confusing about faith, even people who have been on this journey for many years, is how to do that. You know, many people are like my friend Edwin. They're after that experience. They don't want to, you know, Edwin had an epiphany because he had the experience. He was there when the penny dropped. You know, he didn't hear about this knowledge. He didn't read about it as a theory. He experienced it firsthand. And I think most people want that with their faith as well. They want to experience God, the audible voice or the miraculous, up front. They want the experience. But how does that work? It's good in theory. How does it work in practice? What's the result of pursuing a faith that is purely about our experience and based on our experience? Well, I'd love to throw that question out to you to see what you come up with. So the question as it stands is this: are you happy with the idea that others have experienced God so that you don't need to? Or do you want to encounter God for yourself? And if so, what are you currently doing about it? 5 minutes.
It's really important to be open to encounters all the time. As soon as you start saying, I can do this myself and I don't need God in this, I think you're going to probably go down the wrong track. So I think in that sense, we always need to be looking out for God. What I'm doing at the moment is I'm being really determined about reading the Bible every day, reading 3 or 4 chapters every day to keep me in that space, especially at the start of the day, so your whole day ends up being an encounter with God.
I mean, it's all very well saying, God loves me, God died for me. But, how do you actually, as an individual, as a young person, how do you actually allow your life to be transformed by God? And I think for me, it is about, first and foremost, I think it is about spending time getting to know who God is. And getting to know how God cares about us. And I think, we live in a busy world. We live with so much noise. Constantly we're sort of exposed to, TV, movies, we're always plugged in. And actually just to spend some time in stillness and to ask God the question, what do you think about me? What do you really think about me? And so I spend time daily doing that. And I think that's how I start that transformational journey. I also meet with wise people who can help me make sense of my life. So I meet with people and I say, hey, I'm going through this. And then I start explaining what I'm going through, and then they ask me questions that help me to recognise what God is doing in my life and help me to recognise what I don't see. Judas, one of the disciples, walked with Jesus for 3 years, saw the miracles, heard all the great teaching, went to all the parties. At the end of the day, he missed that he was God. So he saw everything but didn't recognise it. And I reckon there's so many times that we just don't recognise God at work in our lives. And I reckon I sometimes need friends and wise people to say, hey, isn't that great how God did this for you the other day? Isn't this great how God loves you so much that this happened in your life? Because I just missed that stuff. And I think that's what we need. And then I need to get better at recognising that myself. I need to get better at every day looking back over my day and saying, where was God today? Where did I see him? How do I know that God loves me? We've just got to open our eyes to recognise it.
To me, faith is vital to good mental and emotional health. The fact of the matter is that all of us have core emotional needs to feel safe, needs to feel significant, to have a purpose, and even to feel innocent. And what we're suggesting here is that we cannot drum these things up, these feelings up by ourselves. We need a God who doesn't just look on, but is actively pursuing us. And if there's any epiphany to be had, let it be this: that our efforts to reach this God are not unrequited. In fact, quite the opposite. God, while we were yet sinners, died for us. He approached us, and this is documented in the Bible. Now, we've talked about how we want to experience God individually. And that's a very Western, very individualistic notion that we can even achieve that, or that we should achieve that. The reality is we do at some point need to trust the experience and wisdom of others. And I hope you've heard that loud and clear, that it's both and. We want to encounter God, and that's okay, but we need to listen to those who have gone before, those who have written, those who have experienced God. And so I hope that in the days and weeks and years to come, you will surround yourself with such people. To me, I call that church. I hope you've enjoyed the series and that it's going to help your mental, emotional health. Thanks for listening. God bless you.